Okay, we're live.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Wednesday, December 8th. It is roughly 3 p.m. and we are convening this work session of the Lincoln County Board of Commissioners to discuss the American Recovery Plan Act and how much money we have been given, how much is still available, and how we might spend what is left. So I will call this meeting to order. We do have a quorum of all three commissioners present, and I will move to the discussion. We have most of the representatives from the M team, which consists of department directors and elected officials of the county. And I guess I'll turn it over to Council Ewell at this point.
Yep, thank you, Chair Hunt. So I had provided some slides that were prepared by the Association of Oregon Counties, AOC. So hopefully everybody did review those. I just prepared a summary of where hopefully our discussions go today. So as you said, this is going to be a work session on the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA. You can go to the next slide, Casey. I don't know if I can.
Okay, pardon me. Yep. Next slide.
So just a quick summary. On March 11th of 2021, Congress passed ARPA. It was given $1.9 trillion to go to COVID-19 relief. So essentially to address negative impacts of COVID-19. So recipients were businesses, local governments, homeowners, there's rent assistance. The county was granted $9,164,533. Approximately 4.8 has already been received by the county this year. The remainder is going to arrive in 2022, which I believe is in May or June. So we have until December 31st, 2024 to allocate how we want to use these funds. We have until December 31st, 2026 to spend the money that we've been given. Okay, next slide. So some recommendations from staff is that the commissioners create an ARPA team. The team would make a needs assessment with the commissioner's direction, which would essentially provide a basis for what funding areas the board wants to look at. That would include, an assessment of community needs for the ARPA team to consider, an application process that the team would put in place. So essentially departments could apply, and eventually the board, if they are going to allow community members and nonprofits to apply for some of the funding. Okay. This is just some considerations. In my research, a lot of local governments are using funds to address housing issues. Just a stat from our area shows that just this past year, Lincoln County home values have increased by 12% just this past year. And then over a course of 5 years, 36% total. And obviously, the cities might be a little greater. Unincorporated areas may be a little lesser. Okay. So in doing the research on this seems to be where most of the money and funding has been going to for specific programs. So community health and wellness, which does include mental health and substance abuse, child abuse and neglect, homelessness and housing services, economic recovery and growth, public facility preservation and enhancement. Some public facilities have started replacing, for example, their HVAC systems. And then stabilizing, revitalizing neighborhoods, quality of life, childcare, and public safety. So these are pretty common identified needs in most communities that are using ARPA funds.
Hey, Kristen, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say broadband is another one that's very common in that.
Yeah, so probably economic recovery and growth would qualify. stabilizing, revitalizing neighborhoods if you're expanding like broadband services to certain areas that don't have it. Okay. So there are specific rules what the funds cannot be used for, and it's pretty clear. You can't use it for any kind of debt service, replenishing your rainy day fund, paying any kind of settlements or judgments, and pension payments cannot be used for. In the law, there's a huge equity focus for receiving the ARPA dollars. If you do decide to go with a team approach, a recommendation is for there to be an equity thread to assist with dealing with some of the pandemic and how that's affected different groups disproportionately. We do have underrepresented communities in Lincoln County that could benefit from this ARPA funds from the programs that we decide to use it for. Okay. My recommendation is for the ARPA team to come up with an application that would specifically include a question to recipients regarding services and programs and how those funds would be used to help underserved and underrepresented groups. That would include targeting, how you're going to target your outreach. So that should all be included for anybody applying for these funds. Okay. Eventually, if the board would like to consider nonprofits as part of receiving these funds, my recommendation and other staff recommendations are to do listening sessions, have the nonprofits share what issues they are facing, any kind of proposal for addressing long-term problems that they see and how they're going to target these issues. Okay. So some examples that I've seen other entities use ARPA funds are for a mobile health unit. I've seen some funds go to some rural water districts for infrastructure improvements, a wage incentive program for childcare providers, and then public and private partnerships for affordable housing initiatives, and then also county park improvements, mostly around wastewater and treatment, septic treatment. Okay. So moving forward, it would be great to have a discussion of if you guys do envision creating a team that would consider and maybe draft an application. And then just a recommendation of what amount you would like to use for the next fiscal year. And then how to draft some public input processes. So holding more public meetings, would you like to use a consultant to get more information out there, maybe conducting surveys of the community, just some ideas. Okay. And that's it. So that's just some talking points to help you commissioners as you move forward and decide how best to organize these funds and what kind of process you see would work for the county to distribute these.
All right. Annie, who wants to go first? First, thoughts or comments, commissioners? Commissioner Jacobson.
Thank you, Kristen, for putting this together, Council Ewell, and providing the information, and for the information I think that was sent around previously to the M team that the Association of Oregon Counties put out. Couple of questions or comments rather. One is, I do believe, at least in other jurisdictions, that there has been some use of county ARPA funds along with ARPA funds that cities received to kind of, do joint projects or get something done that maybe, went across jurisdictions. So there is maybe a possibility there of at some point connecting with some of our cities to see if maybe there's a way to kind of leverage some things. I also just want to, at least from my perspective, I see that, we would want to entertain both internal types of projects as well as external types of projects. So you had examples that obviously would be internal, like a mobile health clinic or county parks, but I would like to look at a process that would allow for both M-team directors to propose projects that fits under ARPA dollars as well as external projects. It's all my comments. Thanks.
Commissioner Hall.
Yeah. I like the idea of putting together a team. I also am with Commissioner Jacobson and wanting to solicit the broadest input possible. I know, there's going to be a pretty fierce competition for this money, and $9 million is a lot of, sounds like, and is a lot of money, but there are many, many worthwhile things that we know could be accomplished with these funds, and they'll be used up before we know it, unfortunately.
All right. I certainly don't have any concerns with those objections. I'll note that county budget, general fund is somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 million. So that gives you a perspective on 9 million. So I guess comments from other M-team members. Don't all jump at once.
I got
Ano.
well, it's more of a question. And do you think I'll volunteer right now to serve on a team. Okay. So, but to work this issue, but do you think when we develop a plan to spend the money, are you anticipating, the commissioners, that we would identify like right up front where the full amount of money is going, or would we try to commit a certain amount of the monies first and have it like a tiered approach time wise or is it your inclination and instincts tell you let's get a plan that lays out all the commitments all at one time up front? So it's a question. I don't offer to serve on the group, but.
Commissioner Jacobson.
I mean, I guess one thing I would say is if we haven't all, got the memo yet, I think COVID's here to stay. Because you can use this money directly on COVID response, and things can go up and down and all of that. I mean, I would say that maybe we hold some of that money back so that we can staff up again if we need to, if we needed to do another mass fax clinic, if we needed to bring our public health nurses back out of retirement for a second time, or whatever it is we needed to do, that we still had some resources, to pull into to do that until 2026. But you also would want some sort of plan to use that money right at the end, right? Because if you don't use it, and it's just sitting there, then you have to give it back. So I would like to see some pocket of funds that public health can tap into if we have a huge outbreak again, God forbid, and we need to utilize that, but then the committee come up with some creative way at the end, to get rid of that if we don't need it. That's just my thoughts.
People moved on my screen. I'm sorry. Commissioner Hall, any comments? Or if not, we'll go to Director Romero. I see you've raised your hand.
Nothing for me at this time.
Okay. Director Romero.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if any thought has been given to how a committee would be formed. Like Director Hussein, I would be happy to participate, but on the other hand, I have a lot of requests too. So I don't know if it would make sense for Public Health and Human Services to be a part of a screening committee if we hope to put some proposals on the table. So I would just throw that out there as a question and for general information.
So can I share just what I've seen for committee makeup is obviously your finance director, your administrator, perhaps maybe the BOC chair at the time and your legal counsel, and then maybe a few more members. But you're right, Jane, since you're going to make requests, it would probably be a conflict because all your requests would probably get approved. So
Oh,
you might
I like
want
hearing
this.
that.
So you might want more of just, support staff, commissioners. Obviously, your administrator and finance director would be extremely important. So I'll let you guys kind of process that and think about it.
Well, I think that's kind of the first question I have is the composition of the committee. And I think we just hit the crucial question on the nail on the head. I think we need to have a cross section of the county and certainly, excuse me, certainly we want to be conscious of conflict. I think that those are valid questions, valid concerns. Other thoughts or comments? Do we want to try to, I guess, hear a recommendation of who should be on the committee and who's willing to be on the committee?
Well,
Oh,
for any of us that, as Jane said, because I fall in the same camp, our department is operated under such extraordinary circumstances of being understaffed in this real estate boom that was indeed partially fueled by COVID of all things. And so I fall into, full disclosure, I fall into that category too of I've got an ask or two that I'd like to try to make so that our department can begin to catch up with, falling so far behind in terms of serving the public. So if that's seen as a conflict, there's a way around it. I know that if, you don't vote on your own project. I've been part of a group that's how they handled that, but the appearances of being on the board and might be enough to say, look, just make sure you find a few folks that are not going to be asking to tap into those funds. If that's one way to do that.
well, at the risk of, I guess, being in error, I'd be surprised if there were very many people in this meeting that didn't think they would be submitting applications. So
Be a small
it might
committee,
be
right?
easier to say, if you're not going to be submitting an application, you can volunteer for the committee, but I don't think we want to go about it that way. But, I think from my standpoint, if we can identify, a handful of people, 5, 6, maybe 7, the dog's excited, and recognize that when it's your group of or your department that's requesting the money, you will not participate in the discussion. I don't know a better way to do it. Katie, go ahead.
I was trying to find my virtual hand, sorry, instead of my real one. I mean, here's just an idea to throw out in terms of process here. We could look at, some non-M team staff to help create the form. So what's going to be on that form? What do we want to ask? How much project description do you want, et cetera? We could then have M-team directors apply by using that form. And we could have commissioners decide. I mean, there's a more straightforward, process. We still could, make those applications available for people to look at or whatever. But we could, have certain staff just kind of create the form so it's maybe, non-biased, and then M team members can apply, and then we would decide. I think if and when we get to external applications, maybe we do want some other people besides us, but I would say the same exact thing was maybe a problem, which is that there's a lot of external people that would probably apply. So it's probably the same kind of thing, but I'm not going to be applying. So I don't know. There's just a thought.
So can I just clarify a few things? So this committee, think of it more as a gatekeeper to make sure that applicants, when they do apply for the funds, first of all, we make sure that what they're applying for qualifies for ARPA funds. Secondly, we're just going to be more of, making sure that they have done everything that they need to do. And then the committee would likely make a recommendation, but you, the commissioners, would make the final decision on any distribution of funds or approval of use of those funds. So the committee is not, they're not supposed to be setting policy per se. You guys will make the ultimate decision whether these projects are projects that you want to fund, that it's a priority for you commissioners. So really, your administrator, your finance director, your legal counsel, I have other legal assistants would add on the committee, because those are going to be the questions that are going to be hardest is, do these projects qualify for these funds? And then we'll need, finance and Christina's help with amounts. But, really it's that legal question of, can you do what you're asking for with these ARPA funds? So, given that, I don't know how many MT members, especially if they're going to be applying for funds, if it would make sense to serve on the committee. So.
Good comments. Thank you. Commissioner Hall.
Oh, I understand, the potential conflicts, but at the same time, as it's been stated, probably most of our MT members are going to have projects on the table. And if they just recuse themselves, well, actually, it will be an advisory vote to us, I assume, on what projects to fund. They can be very open about it, and we can take that into consideration when we look at their recommendations. But I think excluding MT members would not be a good idea personally.
Other comments? I guess I would align more or less along Council Yule's comments. It's just a committee that's going to winnow the recommendations, and we're going to make the final decision.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my thoughts.
Adam has his hand raised, Chair.
Oh, thank you. Lieutenant Shanks.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Adam Shanks, Administrative Lieutenant, Sheriff's Office. And I just wanted to offer, I have had the opportunity in the past to participate on statewide grant review committees. And basically what we're talking about here is the process they used. Obviously, most counties were submitting applications in the process that I participated in. When what they would do actually is whoever that grant review committee was, they would send all the grant projects out ahead of time for a ranking system. So they had an initial ranking from all the panelists. Once those were received, the panel gathered together and would have discussion about them to ensure that the rankings remain the same, or if they wanted to make changes, etc. When it came to the time that a panelist's project for their county was up for discussion, they would be excused from the room so the remainder of the panel could discuss it, and they would abstain from any votes on any changes to that. Just wanted to give that perspective that opportunity might be a solution in this scenario as well. And then ultimately, the recommendations would likely go to you as a board. And
right.
With that, the Sheriff's Office would also participate however you see fit.
Okay, thank you for those comments. I have two hands up. Director Husing and then Director Shearer.
Yeah, I just want to make it, the key question I have following up on Kristen's explanation about what the committee functions would be though, but there's a very important, at one point I thought I was hearing that the committee is more of a screening process to make sure that people have filled out the forms correctly, provided the right information, set up exactly what that process is. But to me, that's one terribly important function. That's probably a threshold function. But is it contemplated by the board that committee, because that's what I think we're getting into now. A second step is actually providing a set of recommendations and priorities among the applications that have been submitted. I just want to get that clear in my mind. Because if it's that second piece, then Adam's point's well taken. You need to at least create a firewall there where you're not voting on your own projects, or elect not to be part of that recommendation process, period, because of even the appearance of conflicts. But okay, thank you.
Well, I think you've articulated well the I guess confusion I feel. Is this committee simply going to look at applications and say, yes, this cause qualifies under the terms of the ARPA money? Or is it going to go a step further and say, not only does it qualify, but we would rank it here above this or below that? And that I think gets more complicated. Director Scheer, your thoughts?
Well, that was really my question as well. I think it needs to, the mandate of this committee needs to be clear. Is this, a screening, a validation as far as eligibility and completeness of application versus a more qualitative valuation of the applications? The former is very straightforward and doesn't actually require more than the few people that we've talked about. While the validation and ranking that would require a more diverse panel. I think we need to decide that before we go on to deciding who. I mean, I agree with Kristen. If this is just a screening, then it doesn't require that many people.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Council Ewell.
Thank you. So just to point out, so I appreciate Adam's comments, but typically when you apply for a grant, it's very clear what the grant focus is. This is really different. This is a lot more broader. This is really policy decisions on what your priorities are as commissioners, what you think priorities should be for the community and what needs need to be addressed. I don't feel that that's appropriate for the committee to make those policy decisions. This would be a very public process. The committee would ensure that legally these requests can be made for monies. And then this would be a public process where you would get public input. It would be a decision for the board to make in a public hearing on what project they wanted to move forward. And it would give everybody an opportunity to see, at least an opportunity for their request to go that far to the commissioners and not, die down in a committee.
So I sense what you're saying, Counselor, is that, and I guess Director Scheer and others, that a committee to simply determine that the application meets the eligibility criteria, that would be the role of the committee. And as far as approval of the grants, once they've passed that hurdle, would involve the commissioners and public input, while public input with the commissioners being the final say-so. Is that fair?
Yeah, so those are just ideas if that's the route you're going. If you want to go, the different route, then you'd have to really give clear, we only want to look at these two issues. We just want to look at healthcare, and we just want to look at, maybe public safety as what we're considering. So I think it would just be really tough for the committee to make those policy decisions. And you'd probably potentially have a lot of conflicts depending on how it was made up. So.
Well, I'm also interested in hearing from others. I mean, I'm certainly not clairvoyant as to what the best needs are or why the needs are a certain level of urgency. Having said that, Commissioner Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. I think you, Commissioner Hunt, just about said what I was going to say, but it seems to me like maybe we need, for lack of a better words, kind of a validation committee, which really just does a legal review as well as a review of if said project is ARPA eligible. And if we have the dollars for that with finance, and then that would go to commissioners unranked. We would simply just get a pile. But I would also say that besides just our regular kind of public input, I think it would be nice, as we do when we give out grant money, that we perhaps have a presentation. So that would be the time where M-Team members or others could actually come present to the board, talk about the actual project, and receive public input on that. So I think there is still a way for M-Team members to be engaged in that, because obviously a paper form tells you so much, but I think being able to have a discussion and ask questions with all the people proposing, even though that might be a lot of projects, I think that's important. But I do understand that I think, having a validation committee or piece in there that basically just says, legally we can do this and it's ARPA eligible is really important before we move forward with any discussion of any proposal.
All right. I sense we're getting closer to a consensus.
Mhm. Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Hall.
Yeah, I just want to say the approach just described by Commissioner Jacobson is one that I'd be very comfortable with.
All right, so we seem to have a consensus that we'll have, well, we can call it a qualification committee, a gatekeeper committee, whatever. And that would, I sense, not necessarily require a lot of people, but certainly representative from our legal department. Probably Director Shearer, I guess I'll say Director Collier. And others that you'd recommend, Council Ewell or other commissioners?
I would recommend your administrator.
Right.
Yep, the future administrator would be.
Yep.
I recommend. I mean, it's up to you. If you probably, all the commissioners do not want to be on this. I was going to say the chair, but I would just leave it at the administrator, and then
the board chair, whoever that person may be at that time.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay, that would be a committee of 5 if I counted correctly. Legal counsel, finance, HR, county administrator, and BOC. Are we comfortable with that number and composition? Hearing only crickets. Commissioner Jacobson, you were going to comment?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's just really important to me that committee understand that they're not, making a judgment call on the proposal. I don't want them ranking anything. I think that's important for, us to all do as a board together and hear from those proposers, that it's simply just asking the question, is this legal? Does it meet ARPA requirements? And obviously, HR, is there some HR component here that we need to think about that, would be problematic? But I think it's just important that the merit of the proposal is not graded, more so just, is it legal and does it fit?
Yep.
ARPA.
Well, I think we can make those directions pretty clear, and we'd have legal counsel to help us stay on that path.
Well, and that the application is complete. So it's the legal eligible completeness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be part of the criteria for qualification. So if I don't hear any objections, I'll assume that's the consensus of the group. And I don't see anybody raising hands or jumping up and down. So I think we've got our committee that will be the gatekeeper or the qualifying entity. And as Commissioner Jacobson noted, you're not going to rank. You're not going to say this makes more sense or less sense from a big picture standpoint, simply whether or not under the terms of the ARPA money, this would be an acceptable use of those funds. Anything else, Council Ewell, or should we go on? And I guess I'm not real clear on the next steps, I think
I'm
comment has been
comfortable.
made. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
if you want to make a motion for an ARPA committee team and just
Right.
include the members you'd like to designate. And we will get to work on an application.
All right. I'll make it easy if I can. I'll entertain a motion to create an ARPA committee to review the qualifications only of applications for ARPA money, and that committee to consist of a representative from the legal department, our finance director, our HR director, our county administrator, and the then current chair of the Board of Commissioners.
I will
I
second.
was so. Go ahead.
I saw-
Mr. Jacobson.
I saw Katie go first, so.
So moved.
All right,
Second.
thank you, Commissioner Jacobson. That's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion carries unanimously. So we have a committee. I guess maybe staff or at this point can work on or I guess work with the individual commissioners and work on developing a process for I guess public input comments on the proposals once they clear that gatekeeper committee, and scheduling the appropriate activities as we address allocation of the funds.
Thank you. So what we will do is we will work on getting an application out. So if we're going to start internally with M-Team directors, that would be provided. And then when it gets submitted to the committee, so just a consideration for everybody that we will look at is if what you are requesting, there's other funding sources available. So remember, there were other COVID dollars that especially HHS received. So if there's other funding sources that you're utilizing that before you consider ARPA, because we will be asking that question if there's another funding source that is available.
Or I would say a justification on why that's not appropriate, or maybe you have to cost match or what have you.
Right. But I would open it up for M-Team just to discuss about if they have any questions, preliminary questions about ideas that they have, or.
Before we do that, I guess I'll ask a question. How do we integrate possible applications? Well, I'm sure we will have applications from outside agencies. I don't want to get too far down the road with internal and then kind of have to back up and say, gee, we've got a pile of external. So I think there needs to be a parallel or simultaneous or integrated process for both internal and external applications.
So I've seen it in phases. Also, if you make a decision, the three of you, how much you want to designate for internal versus external. And so that would be an option, how much of the funds you want to benchmark, I guess, for that.
Well, that could be something that evolves as we continue this dialogue. Comments, questions from M-Team members? Oh,
When
you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'm unmuted back for, so just time wise, as we see this play out, so I understand based on what I've heard already that maybe there'll be some, in effect, part of these resources parked on the side of the road for later allocation, but just looking ahead, best of all worlds, we establish the committee, we do this robust, inclusive, transparent process to not just vet the applications, but also have the policy discussions about the different proposals. When do you see that, when can people begin to think that a first tranche of these projects and allocations would be made? Does anybody have a clear idea of at least a thought about when that might actually happen?
Well, I think the committee needs to meet first, and then they would come up with a schedule, a calendar. And the first step would be just creating the application, having an application deadline, and then review of the applications, going to a public meeting and presenting what applications, there might be some, I'm imagining some back and forth between departments if there is a project that maybe would not qualify, and we'd have to notify that department if there's something they could make changes to. But I foresee that if we get an application done before the end of the year that goes out to M-Team, that they have maybe 4 to 6 weeks to complete it. And then we would be looking at mid-February for a review, and then probably late February, early March for the first public hearing on at least that first distribution of funds. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Jacobson, I see you have your hand raised, but I'm going to ask Director Shearer, do you have any problems with that timetable? Because I know it's so whenever we talk about budget, you've got a lot of different issues pulling at you.
Sure. I think there is some, the timeline that was outlined it sounds great, although I would request that the planned actual distribution of the funds be scheduled for after July 1, and perhaps try to close out this process, or at least the first phase of it in terms of awards, in time to include them in the fiscal 23 budget to minimize delays in distribution due to budget limitations.
Okay, that seems to make sense. Commissioner Jacobson.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Hunt. I guess one step I would like some feedback on from M-Team, and not just speaking for yourselves, but also kind of for the public, is thank you for your slides, Kristen. I think those were helpful, but there is, our actual ARPA bill was hundreds of pages long. It might be worth it for us to reach out to National Association of Counties or some other entity or even a contractor that has really dug in and see if we could have a maybe a virtual workshop, another one to really dig in deep to understand what you can spend it for and have a Q&A session. I think this would be helpful for our M-Team members making proposals, but also to the public making proposals. I think this would allow for better proposals. And I think it would help this gatekeeper committee, for lack of a better word, if the proposals coming in understood the requirements, to begin with. I think that would be helpful. So, I'm happy to take on myself kind of trying to find this expert that could come in and perhaps do a virtual workshop where people could learn more and then really have time for kind of a Q&A.
Council Young.
Yeah, my understanding was that was what Ernst & Young was being utilized for. I don't know if that's the case or not, that they were actually looking at what qualifies and giving advice to the county.
Great idea. We actually do have them on contract, and I will reach out and see if they could do a presentation with time, at the end for people to ask questions. Again, I think that would just really help with more targeted proposals, so that the committee is not going through proposals that obviously don't fit and people are getting frustrated or whatever. I think that would be helpful for people to have a source of information to say, hey, does this work? So I will reach out to them.
Okay. Ideally, when we do the application, it's going to be kind of pretty clear, maybe as far as, hey, check this box. If you meet, this is what your project is regarding, check this box, an explanation of how it's related to COVID-19 or the effects of COVID-19, the negative effects that it had on the community. So I think the application can do a lot of education and explaining when somebody, applies. But I'm happy if you could get a contact at Ernst & Young, and then we could coordinate, and our office could actually probably do something joint for the M-Team. So when we roll out the application that we go through, and there's a clear understanding of, hey, this is what the funds can be applied for if it's not clear at that time.
Yeah, I will reach out to Greg at Ernst & Young. Like I said, they were already on contract. So I will reach out to them to see if we can set something up. I think having that open to the public or having it recorded so that as we move into possibly taking applications from the public, that could be a resource for them too, would be helpful.
Good conversation, good discussion. Anything else? I guess it seems to me we've got a committee, gatekeeper committee. Maybe Council you could again kind of identify the tentative timetable as we look beyond, I guess, development of the application.
So when you start public hearings, so after development of the application, we do a training for
Right.
when we roll out the application, so everybody's kind of clear on when they apply and what's required.
When would that be likely to happen? Late
Well,
January, February?
Yeah, if we can get an application finalized by the end of year, then rolling it out after the new year would make sense. And giving 6 weeks probably for individuals to brainstorm and then get all their ducks in order for what projects they're proposing.
Yeah, and having the Ernst & Young piece somewhere in that 6 week or
Yeah.
right at the beginning would be good. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so somewhere middle of January toward the end of February would be when applications training would be provided and applications would be accepted. Then they'd be reviewed as far as the criteria. And then I'm going to guess sometime March, start the public process as far as hearing supportive discussion, and Board of Commissioners start a review and prioritization.
That makes sense.
Commissioners, that seem agreeable to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I will note that the month of April, I will be on a boat on the Mediterranean. I did that a couple of years ago, and I guess the sirens are calling me back. So not that you guys can't go ahead without me, and I won't be chair after the end of this year. Just an FYI. All right. Are we clear? Other questions? All right, so Council, you'll get that committee together and start development of the application. All right. Other comments from anyone? Commissioners? Claire, your microphone's open. Not anymore.
Sorry, no, I don't have anything else for right now, Mr. Chair.
Okay, just trying to give you the opportunity if you were looking for it. All right, anything else? All right, I guess we'll move on then to public comment. Any public comment? I'd have to look at the participant list. Commissioner or Director Miller, I don't see anyone that is not part of this.
No,
MT.
Chair, we have no community members.
Do we have any written input?
Well, we do not.
All right. There being no public comment, any other business to come before the group? I will say, I think this has been an excellent first step. I'll be candid and say I wasn't exactly sure how this might all evolve, but I think we've got a process that will make sure that we're getting quality applications involving the community with public input, and should do a good job of assuring that we're putting these dollars to the best use possible within our county for the benefit of our people. So a good first step. Any other comments? If not, thank you for all your time. Have a good evening, and I guess it's we can start saying happy holidays to all. So thank you. We are adjourned.